you have been told a story about a government agency created by elected officials, designed to protect ordinary Americans from financial chaos. The story of the Federal Reserve. In episode 1 of this series, we showed you what the Federal Reserve does, how it prints money, how it inflates your purchasing power away, how it creates the invisible tax that steals your wealth while you sleep. But we never told you where it came from. Tonight, we go back to the beginning, to a night in November 1910, to a private island off the coast of Georgia, to a secret meeting that 7 men have spent decades trying to erase from history, and to the night the fate of American money was decided, without the knowledge of a single elected official. This is the origin story of everything we have exposed. To understand Jekyll Island, you must first understand what came before it. The year is 1907. America is booming, and the most powerful man in that boom is not a president. It is a banker, John Pierpont Morgan. By 1907, Morgan's banking empire controlled vast swaths of American industry, railroads, steel, insurance. His reach extended into every corner of the economy. But Morgan had a problem. The American banking system at the time was decentralized. Hundreds of independent banks. No central authority. No single entity that controlled the money supply. For the biggest bankers, this was a problem. Independent banks meant independent competition. It meant the biggest players couldn't fully control credit, couldn't fully control prices, couldn't fully control the economy. They needed a crisis. So in 1907, they appear to have engineered one. The Panic of 1907. Here is what the history books tell you. A financial panic erupted. Banks began to fail. A credit crisis spread through the system like wildfire. Here is what the history books often leave out. J.P. Morgan himself stepped in as the unofficial savior. He organized the bailouts. He decided which banks would be saved and which would be allowed to fail. He alone decided the fate of American finance, without a single vote being cast. Then he turned to the American public and said something remarkable. This must never happen again. The same man who many historians believe helped engineer the crisis was now proposing the solution. And the solution was exactly what the biggest bankers had always wanted. A central bank. November 1910. Senator Nelson Aldrich, the most powerful politician in American finance, sends private invitations. The invitations go to 7 men. Not 7 elected officials, not 7 public servants, 7 of the most powerful private bankers in America. Together, these 7 men and their associated interests represented an estimated 1/4 of the world's entire wealth. The instruction was simple. Tell no one, and above all, do not travel together. Each man arrived separately at the private rail station in Hoboken, New Jersey. They were instructed to use only first names, no last names, no titles, no affiliations. If asked by anyone, they were duck hunters. On a routine sporting trip. Duck hunters. The most powerful financial minds in America, disguised as duck hunters. The private train traveled through the night, south, into Georgia, to the coast, to Jekyll Island. The Jekyll Island Club was one of the most exclusive private resorts in the world. Its members included the Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers, the Morgans. For the duration of the meeting, the entire island staff was replaced. No journalists, no politicians, no public. No record that the meeting was happening at all. For 9 days, 7 men sat in a private room and designed the financial architecture of the most powerful nation on earth, without a single public vote, without a single public debate, without the knowledge of a single American citizen. What were they designing? A bill, a piece of legislation that would become The Federal Reserve Act. Here is the problem they faced. Americans hated the idea of a central bank. They had seen what central banking did in Europe, how it concentrated power, how it financed wars, how it transferred wealth from the many to the very few. President Andrew Jackson had famously destroyed the Second Bank of the United States in 1836, calling it a monster. The American public did not want a central bank. So the men at Jekyll Island made a decision. Don't call it a central bank. Call it something that sounds like it belongs to the people. Call it the Federal Reserve. Every word in that name was chosen to deceive. Federal, suggesting government ownership and control. It is not federal. It is privately owned by its member banks. Reserve, suggesting safety, security, a backup for the people's money. It holds no reserve that protects you. It creates the money that dilutes you. The name was the first lie. It would not be the last. The Jekyll Island Plan was presented to Congress not as a banker's scheme, but as a People's Protection Act. The men behind it were careful. They made sure the bill appeared to have opposition. Bankers publicly argued against it. Why? Because if the big bankers publicly opposed the bill, the public would support it. The performance was perfect. On December 23, 1913, while most members of Congress had gone home for Christmas, the Federal Reserve Act was signed into law. In a single stroke of a pen, the power to create money in America was transferred from the United States Treasury to a private banking institution. Forever. That was 1913. More than a century ago. Let us follow the thread. The Federal Reserve's first major action was to help finance the First World War. By expanding the money supply to fund the war, it created the inflation that wiped out the savings of ordinary Americans and Europeans. The Great Depression of 1929. Many economists argue the Federal Reserve made it worse by contracting the money supply at the exact wrong moment. 1971. Nixon ends the gold standard. Now the Federal Reserve could create money without limit, without anchor, without constraint. 2008. The financial crisis. The Federal Reserve's response? Print more money. Bail out the banks. The same banks that own the Federal Reserve. 2020. A pandemic. The Federal Reserve prints more money in 2 years than it had in the previous century combined. And what does that create? The inflation we exposed in Episode 1, the debt spiral we exposed in Episode 2, the banking illusion we exposed in Episode 3, the corporate fraud we exposed in Episode 5. All of it traces back to a single room, a single island, 7 men, 9 days, and 1 pen stroke on December 23, 1913. The debt is still growing. The inflation is still running. The banking illusion is still in operation. The system that was designed on Jekyll Island is still running, exactly as designed. Shadow Ledger HQ. Now you know.